Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 13th of December 2024. First chart is the US Dollar Index Futures. You can see that last week, or 2 weeks ago, when I wasn't here, the market pulled back initially and tested for supply, pushed higher in response, and then closed just off its highs. And at the time, you would have probably suggested it was an unconfirmed absorption bar. In response this week, the market tested for supply and pushed higher up to the highs of the range. So you would say for sure last week's bar was absorption taking place in response to its pullback here. The market's now trading up at the highs of the range. If this strength continues, I don't expect a great deal of resistance above this line. In this zone here, I don't expect much resistance whatsoever. Certainly less than the market would have encountered at this level. But then I do expect resistance will increase again up here. So if the market's strong enough to continue higher in response, I do think that the resistance will ease for a period now, and the market will be able to move higher with relative ease. This week's rise also put some of the other associated markets under pressure, especially the currencies, which you'll see as we move along. E-mini S&P, this is S&P 500 index futures. 2 weeks ago, the market only pushed higher on quite low volume, really, down here. And this week, prices pulled back slightly in response. There was certainly a lack of demand 2 weeks ago, but the market's pulled back this week on an increase in volume, and the narrow spread suggests that demand is present. If not, all of that extra volume would have forced price lower with a wider spread. The narrow spread and higher volume, average volume, suggests that there was buying support present in the market. So look for a positive response next week, if that's the case. US Treasury 10-year note futures, they were showing some signs they were attempting to break out here. 2 weeks ago, volume was very low. There was some testing for supply down here, and then price popped up towards the end of the week, I imagine. But this week, supply's been drawn out, possibly with the strength in the US dollar being shown, and prices pulled back, but on reduced volume. So selling pressure wasn't a feature this week. What's happened is the market's been forced to stretch lower in order to find enough demand to satisfy the sellers. And this is generally seen as an overreaction or an exaggeration in the spread compared to what it would have been in a more balanced market. Price has been forced to stretch lower in order to find enough buyers to satisfy the sellers. And often in this case, you'll find markets will rebound perhaps to where they should have been, or perhaps where they should have closed originally. So we'll see how that plays out next week. Copper price futures. Copper price futures had been finding some support down here at the lows of the range. There was some consolidation taking place here and a minor attempt to push high here, perhaps in buy the offer fashion. This week's bar attempted to push higher, but for whatever reason, the higher prices weren't supported, and the market ended up closing down near its low in what may prove to be an absorption bar, but that still needs confirmation in response. I expect you'll see an early test for supply in response next week, like this in the first day or so, and then the market will move depending on how much supply is actually drawn out. You can see that volume wasn't particularly high this week, so there was no serious selling pressure in there, or if there was, it's not obvious. So I would expect a test for supply in response early next week, and then perhaps an attempt to push higher again if this bar proves to be absorption. and just waiting for the market to be more favourable for a push higher. Gold price futures. Gold price futures had rolled over a little and were moving lower. You've got a reversal, a 2-bar reversal in place here, and you'll note that the second bar has closed above the original bar's high, which makes it complete. In response to that, there was 2 weeks of consolidation in here, and then this week prices attempted to push higher, but has either seen supply drawn out or there's been unfavourable trading conditions for whatever reason. But you'll see the price still closed as an up bar on an increase in volume and slightly above average volume. So all is not lost. I suggest this is probably an absorption bar, but similar to the copper price futures, you'll likely see a narrow spread down bar for the first day or so next week, which will be a test for supply. And if supply is found to be low and trading conditions are relatively neutral or even positive, I would expect an attempt to push higher in response. That remains to be seen, but keep your eyes open for an early test for supply Monday or Tuesday next week, and then a response depending on how much supply has been drawn out. Silver price futures, doing a similar thing to gold, except in a more exaggerated fashion. There's the highs of the range. We note for the last month back here, price has been in consolidation mode, absorbing supply and perhaps resetting, gaining some strength for a further push higher. In response this week, the market attempted to push higher, but ended up closing lower in a similar fashion to what gold has done, except in a more exaggerated fashion, which is this market's normal want. Similar to gold, volume was a little above the average, and that balances well with this week's spread. You've probably got a line that goes through there like that at $30. So the market remains above that level. There's no serious damage being done. The market's attempting to consolidate just below the highs of the range, in the shadow of the highs of the range, where there's often reduced supply drawn out, and the market's pulled back to that level. The exaggerated spread with probably some short-term traders getting themselves out, and they'll attempt to reload when the market looks more positive again. Light crude price futures have been trading roughly sideways for a period now in this range. You've got the market trading in that range there, sort of oscillating around the $70 mark. Whenever price challenges the lows of the range, there's an up bar in response almost every single time. In fact, every single time. So the market's trading sideways in a range. There's nothing really exciting happening. You could probably trade that if you wanted, but I'm just letting it be for the minute, and I'll wait for a more substantial break, either to the downside or a breakout to the upside. This is the Euro US dollar currency futures. You can see 2 weeks ago the market was in absorption mode, pretty much the inverse of the US dollar, and that's what's happened this week. It's traded the inverse of the US dollar, which was higher, which forced this market lower in response. You've got a little range developing in here, like that, with the last gasp level at the lows here. It's not looking particularly strong, and it is trading the inverse of the US dollar. The British pound's certainly looking stronger. If we switch across and look at the pound, you see this bar here 2 weeks ago traded in the top half of the previous bar and even traded above its high for a short period before closing back within that bar's range. If you go back to the euro, you can see that this bar hardly challenged above and traded much below the halfway mark, the middle of that bar's range, and closed as a slight down bar as opposed to a slight up bar for the British pound. So there's no doubt this market is a little stronger than the euro, not considerably stronger, but a little stronger than the euro. And this week price has traded the inverse of the US dollar, pulled back and closed low. Japanese yen currency futures, they've been trading down near the lows of this little axis line through here, which is above and below these levels here. And you can see the market respected this level here, and the market's coming back down now. It may be drawn to this level, we'll see, to test it for strength. If it doesn't test that for strength and the market reverses, it would actually be a sign of strength, because at the moment you would expect this level will get tested for strength. It should also be noted that it was contract rollover week for many of these markets this week. If we just go back, this contract rollover week here, that's why we've got very high volume. Contract rollover week here, the pound and the yen and the Aussie. Contract rollover week for all these markets. That's why you've got the very high volume. The Aussie dollar continues to look weak. Any sign of strength is muted. The market is pushing lower each time weakness comes in. I expect this is where the market's going to find some support down here. And the next lower level is at 62, just below that, down here. But it's not looking particularly strong. It's looking weak now. It's not able to hold its levels like it was previously. So I think the market's going to settle around 63 for a period if the strength in the US dollar is maintained. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures are stalling out a little bit around the $100,000 level at the moment. We saw the market really accelerate up to that level, then test for supply with a proper test, a whole week's testing back through the range of this up bar, which just slightly achieved the $100,000 level. There was a minor test for supply in the bottom of that bar. But this week here, 3 weeks ago, was a full test for supply, and there was some supply drawn out because volume was above the average. In response, there was an intra-week test for supply here, and then an attempt to push higher in response. But the close slightly off the high suggested some supply was being drawn out still, or that demand had eased to some degree. And in response this week, the market's pulled back and has tested for supply as an inside bar back through the range of this bar for the whole week again. This is the second week the market's pulled back within the range of the previous bar in an attempt to absorb the supply being drawn out. Volume was slightly reduced this week, but about average overall. It's just stalling a bit here. You'll find the market's attempting to absorb the supply. If it's successful, I expect the market will push higher in response. And if it's unsuccessful, you'll probably find the market continues sideways or perhaps just slightly lower. I'm not expecting the market to pull back sharply at this point. It's going to go sideways to up, most likely. Back to the US dollar index futures just quickly. And you'll note in this market as well, it was contract rollover week here. You can see the other weeks in the background. And that's why the volume was high. The market's trying to negotiate a path through the highs of the range here. And this is a proper highs of the range. This is the major highs of a long-term range or a longer-term range. So there's always going to be supply at this level. If price gets through, I do think that the resistance will ease and price will push higher with relative ease until it gets to this level here. So if there's strength early this week, it's going to put the associated markets under pressure, and this market may float higher with relative ease up to and past the 108 level. And that will really put the cat amongst the pigeons in some of those other markets and put them under pressure. I won't be surprised to see an early test for supply, because that's what these markets often do, especially on a Monday. They're sort of seeing if the coast's clear. And that's just for the early part of the week, Monday or Tuesday. And you can see that happened here and here. This was just a straight down bar. But this market here, same thing again. Little test for supply early in the week and then a response. Here's a test for supply early in the week and then a response. Same again, then there's a response. That's what these markets do. And that little tail below the previous close is the market just coming back to test for supply, see if the coast is clear, and then if trading conditions are relatively favourable, they make an attempt to move higher in response. And you'll also find if trading conditions aren't favourable or if supply is drawn out, then the market just continues lower and closes as a down bar. Okay, that's my lot for the week. It's going to be an interesting week or so coming up, I think, leading into Christmas. Now, next week, talking about Christmas, I've got some Christmas parties to attend on Friday night, Saturday day, and Saturday night. So I've got no idea when I'm doing weekly charts next weekend. I'll likely get them up sometime. They may just be in written form. We'll see. Okay, thanks for your time. See ya.